Jack and the Beanstalk.
Fee, fi, fo, fum, I smell the blood of an Englishman.
These words are known by many a schoolboy who, on more than one occasion, has used this magic incantation to punctuate his play. They are words as famous as any in the English language, and when they are heard, the great giant in the story of Jack and the Beanstalk springs to life and can be heard tromping into his house with 3 calves strung by the heels from his belt. One can immediately picture poor Jack quivering in the oven where he had been hidden by the tall woman of the giant's house. All of the details of this captivating story return to one's mind as vividly as when the story was first heard in childhood. Here is a story that has penetrated the very fiber of the English language and traditions. Its popularity even to this day bespeaks its basic appeal and betrays the intrinsic genius of its creator. Yes, the story of Jack, the giant killer, ranks high among the fairy stories, emerging from a rich Anglo-Saxon past to take its place with them as a record, however imaginative, of the evolvement of that race from small beginnings to a great responsibility and destiny by a process of gradual spiritual growth. Here in this familiar story we find another of the many keys that unlock the mystery of the disappearance of the 10 tribes of Israel from the records of history. It is the clever device of a mastermind that clothes a great truth within the intricacies of a parable or a story. The saga of a great people and a great race has been carefully wrapped within the folds of a children's tale. What better method could have been chosen by this sage of long ago than to perpetuate vital historical facts within the eager and imaginative mind of a child, so recently a part of the mind of God? What more formative material could be used in preserving this great racial truth than that which we find in the Saxon fairy tales? For each, in its own way, holds a vital part of this truth, which, when pieced together, paint a magnificent and somewhat overwhelming picture, equaled in majesty only by the final passages of the Book of Revelation. As we shall discover, many of the meanings in the story of Jack and the Beanstalk are corroborated by this and other books of the Bible. Its symbolism understood, the story becomes a classic among Anglo-Israel chronicles, and is another link to restore the chain of events that lead us back directly to the time of Abraham in the Bible. Much revered as the story may be in the hearts of all who have heard it, especially children, as a record of the Anglo-Saxon Celtic race it takes on a new and doubled significance. So let us turn to the story itself. There are 6 characters in this drama. If we comprehend what these characters stand for as symbols, we will get the meaning of the story. 3 of these characters are man and 3 are women. In the first category is Jack, then the man with the enchanted beans, and finally the giant, or ogre as he is sometimes called. The women are, first, the mother of Jack, then the old woman he met on his way to the giant's house, and finally, the great tall woman standing in the doorway of the stately mansion. We will study each of these characters in turn, and when we find out who they are, we shall arrive at some very vital conclusions. With these conclusions we shall know more of the missing links of Anglo-Israel history, and by this see that the author of the tale was a prophet. He was a prophet as truly as any of those found in the Bible, for his prophecies coincide closely with those of the Scriptures and also elaborate upon them. Let us look first at Jack, for if we can understand who he is, we shall have largely solved the enigma of the story. He is the central figure and the hero of the tale. Indeed, what happens to him is the whole theme of it, and therefore of chief interest to us. In the name Jack, we find a shortened form of the name Jacob. Jack, therefore, stands for the same Jacob of the Bible who had 12 fine sons and who, because God found him worthy, was given the spiritual name of Israel. In Jack, then, we have a type of the whole house of Jacob, or the children of Israel. When we hear the giant exclaim as he enters his house, "Fee, fi, fo, fum, I smell the blood of an Englishman," we immediately understand that Jack is an Englishman. Here in this tale is the most direct reference to Israel as England that we have. Jack is very definitely an Englishman, or else the giant wouldn't have not sensed his presence in his house. The Englishman today may be identified very easily. He has a cut, an air that is quite properly his own. One can recognize him at a distance by his clothes, and by his language he is certainly known. We will not explore his characteristics in detail except to note here that an Englishman has a stamp which makes him different from all others. Although he was hidden, the giant knew that there was an Englishman present. Somehow he knew. We find another clue in the name itself, a name so familiar to the English and so often used. The name Jack Tar is so well known to us that we need no explanation that this refers to the English sailor. The Union Jack is likewise the name of England's flag. These simple usages of the name betray its derivation. Jack means Jacob, and from this fact stems the whole plot of our story. Therefore, the hero of our story is Jacob, and every reference to Jack is not only a reference to Jacob, the man, but to Jacob, the progenitor of the children of Israel of the Bible. He is a type for the house of Israel, much as John Bull is a symbol for the English today. Here, incidentally, is another clue to the identification of Israel with England. The bull was the symbol adopted by Joseph as the sign of his house, and it was displayed upon the shields and upon the standards of all who belonged to his house. There is a suspicion that he adopted this sign through his associations in Egypt, where the bull or cow was made an object of worship. He certainly was a man of high esteem in that country, and the mother of his two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, was a priestess in the temples of Egypt. Ephraim, the younger, has been identified with England, and as the receiver of the blessing together with his older brother Manasseh, the United States, retained the symbol of the bull as his own. The nickname John Bull for Ephraim's sons becomes therefore extremely appropriate. In the book of Revelation there is indicated a place to which Israel was to fly, the very same place called by Isaiah the Isles of the West, namely the Isles of England and Ireland and the smaller islands near their coasts. And to the woman, Israel, were given 2 wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness, into her place, the British Isles, where she is nourished for a time, and times, and half a time, from the face of the serpent. Revelation chapter 12, verse 14. With England marked as a future setting for the drama of the children of Israel, as indicated here in Revelation, we find a further identification of Jack as the Englishman of our story, and as the Israel of the Bible story. It is probably for this reason that in this story Israel takes the form of a man rather than that of a woman, as the case is in many of the other folklore stories and in the Bible. The teller of the tale wanted seemingly to impart a direct truth where there would be no mistaking the identity of Israel with England. It is the same truth that Isaiah and other prophets revealed in prophecy, and which has since become a fact in human history. In our story, however, Jack begins his adventures not in England, but in another land. As Jacob, the man of the Bible, the opening scenes place him in Canaan and Egypt. The story begins. A very poor widow once lived with her only son in a little cottage on the border of a great wood. They were so poor that often Jack went supperless to bed. Anyone familiar with Genesis in the Bible will recognize this as descriptive of the condition of Jacob and his sons at the time of scarcity in the land of Canaan. Joseph, the son who had been left to die by his brothers and was finally sold at the suggestion of Judah to a band of Arab traders, was now in Egypt. By his interpretation of Pharaoh's dream, he had been warned of God of the coming famine. Joseph, in storing up the grain, became not only the savior of Egypt, but the savior of Jacob, his father, and all of his brothers. And all countries came into Egypt to Joseph for to buy corn, because that the famine was so sore in all lands. Genesis chapter 41, verse 57. Very briefly, and in terms of symbology, the next sentence sums up the whole experience of the house of Jacob in Egypt. At last things became so bad that Jack's mother made up her mind to sell their cow. The use of the symbol of the cow, Egypt, effectively typifies the term of enslavement in Egypt and the addiction of the children of Israel to the worship of Egyptian gods. So enamored of Egyptian gods had they become that at the time Moses was in the mountain talking with God, they pooled their golden earrings and ornaments and melted them into gold to form a golden calf to worship. The symbol of the cow in the story speaks of the whole Egyptian experience of Israel and the adoption of many of the Egyptian ways of worship. On the way, Jack met a man with a bag of beans in his hand. Jack took such a fancy to the beans that he begged the man to give them to him. Evidently, the beans were very desirable to Jack. "No, indeed," replied the man, "they are magic beans, but you shall have them in exchange for the cow." To this the boy readily agreed. How mindful is this passage of the promise of the children of Israel to Moses, "All that the Lord hath spoken we will do," the well-known vow made at the foot of Mount Sinai. Upon this assumption we shall perceive that the man with the enchanted beans represents Moses, and that the agreement he had with Jack, who is Israel, is none other than the covenant between God and his people. Take note that Jack wanted the man to give him the beans, but the man with the beans exacted the giving of the cow in return. This insistence appears to echo the verses at the beginning of chapter 20 of Exodus, when Moses came down to the people and spoke to them of the commandments of God. I am the Lord thy God, which have brought thee out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image or any likeness of anything. Exodus chapter 20, verses 2 through 4. God revealed his plan for his people, but he required first that they give him their entire attention and give up the worship of the cow of Egypt, a ritual which they found it difficult to part with. In return for this, God made a promise to them through Moses. Behold, I make a covenant. Before all thy people I will do marvels, such as have not been done in all the earth, nor in any nation, and all the people among which thou art shall see the work of the Lord. Exodus chapter 34, verse 10. The gift of the magic beans betokens the many miracles which God wrought in bringing his people out of the land of Egypt and into Canaan. Not the least of these miracles was the precipitation of food in the wilderness of Sin, a food which took a small round form, suggesting a bean, with which the children of Israel were formerly unacquainted. They gave it a name, manna, and they ate it, together with the quail provided, and were sustained. Also the people thirsted there for water, and the people murmured against Moses and said, Give us water that we may drink. Moses, turning to God for an answer to this dilemma, was promised another miracle. Behold, I will stand before thee there upon the rock in Horeb, and thou shalt smite the rock, and there shall come water out of it, that the people may drink. And Moses did so in the sight of the elders of Israel. Exodus chapter 17, verse 6. God performed many miracles for his people as they proceeded on their way to the promised land, which was flowing with milk and honey. Using Moses as his spokesman, God insisted that they keep their promise and make no more graven images of the holy cow of Egypt, nor the image of any other animal of the earth to worship. Thus we find that the first few sentences of the story of Jack and the Beanstalk outline the early history of the children of Israel. It begins with Jacob in Canaan, extends through the bondage in Egypt, and includes the return to the land of Canaan under the leadership of Moses, and the building of the city of Jerusalem as the capital of their new kingdom. Speaking to the people through his chosen prophets, God established them in Canaan, caused them to prosper and to prevail over all their enemies. It is a well-known fact to those who study their Bibles closely that, as long as Israel honored the covenant, God rewarded her and protected her from her enemies. But when the covenant was disregarded, to that degree God allowed her enemies to prevail against her. We have identified just two of the characters in this story. But before continuing in this vein, let us look again at the story itself. Let us focus attention upon the miracle of the tremendous growth of the beans. Jack went to sleep, and while he slept there sprang up as a vine and made a fabulous ascent into the skies. As if in a dream, Jack went outside and started to climb the stalk, going higher and higher until he got to the top. This climbing of the beanstalk is emblematic of the very same ladder that Jacob beheld in his dream at the gates of Luz, where he saw angels ascending and descending. Here different symbols are used, but the meaning is the same. This vision granted Jacob was but a prevision of the kingdom that God is to establish on earth, where men and angels will mingle on earth and have equal access to the secrets of heaven. A casual reading of this passage of the Scriptures will not divulge the greater inner initiation which Jacob was given on that hallowed night. Jacob is here again but a type of all Israel and of all who overcome. Each in his own way and according to the gift of God shall experience this individually. In turn, each of the prophets were given the same vision, and in the relation of their experiences we have in our Bible descriptions of God's realm which otherwise we would not have. Collectively, this intimacy with heaven and the angels within it will someday be enjoyed by all. By this vision Jacob was shown the prospect of the kingdom of heaven as it would be established some day upon earth. He accepted the fact that this great event would come to pass in the far future. He was satisfied with the promise of God that through him and his seed, God would make his kingdom manifest upon earth. Jack, symbolizing Jacob, aspired to this kingdom and began to climb the ladder. Yes, it is Jacob's ladder that he was climbing, the same ladder that is described in Genesis chapter 28, verses 12 through 15. And he dreamed, and behold, a ladder set up on the earth, and the top of it reached to heaven. And behold, the angels of God ascending and descending on it. And behold, the Lord stood above it at the top, and said, I am the Lord God of Abraham thy father, and the God of Isaac. The land whereon thou liest, to thee will I give it, and to thy seed. And thy seed shall be as dust of the earth, and thou shalt spread abroad to the west, and to the east, and to the north, and to the south. And in thee and in thy seed shall all the families of the earth be blessed. And behold, I am with thee, and will keep thee in all places whither thou goest, and will bring thee again into this land. This latter promise was fulfilled when in 1917 General Allenby brought his forces against Jerusalem and England took possession of Palestine. In all other phases the above promise of God to Jacob had been fulfilled. After the forming of a nation in the British Isles, the English spread to all parts of the earth, north, east, south, and west. The British Commonwealth of Nations, the United States of America, and kindred nations are the result of this promise. To say that these people have been, and are, a blessing to the earth in countless ways is a fact that history acclaims. As couriers of the gospel alone, they have fulfilled this prophecy. This missionary work has been going on for several centuries, and today this work has been augmented by technical and economic help, being given to the less fortunate areas of the earth. The assistance that the United States has given in food alone is too well known to enlarge upon. After Jack reached the top of the beanstalk, he found himself in a strange country, the story goes. It appeared to be a barren desert. Not a tree, shrub, house, or living creature was to be seen. At this point of the story we meet the little old woman in a long red cloak. Just as Jack spied the large house of the giant in the distance, this old woman suddenly appeared and told him of the nefarious nature of the odious giant. Jack learned that his father had been wealthy and powerful, but his wealth and his good deeds had gained him the hatred of a wicked ogre. The ogre killed Jack's father and stole all of his money and some valuable possessions, one of them a hen that laid golden eggs, and another an enchanted harp. He intended to kill Jack and his mother too, but Jack's mother managed to escape. In the above we are given several hints as to who the giant really is. We should first note the kind of country the giant abides in. It is desert country, suggesting the sands of Arabia that lie between Canaan and Babylon. The prototype of this giant, who was to seek to wrest away the power and the very life of Israel, was Nebuchadnezzar. The actual image he set up in the plain of Dura was giant in size. Daniel chapter 3 verse 1. The order was given that all should fall down and worship the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. Daniel chapter 3 verse 7. It will be noted that, at the dedication of the image, all the princes, the governors and captains, the judges, the treasurers, the counselors, the sheriffs, and all the rulers of the provinces were required to be present. Having conquered all the civilized world of that time, Nebuchadnezzar sought to ensure the permanence of his victories by the establishment of a new religion and a new economy. Henceforth, gold became the medium of exchange, and has continued to be so down to our present day. It should be reiterated here that Jack represents Jacob, Israel, but as time elapsed, his sons and their families multiplied so that, in the time of Nebuchadnezzar, the Israelites were a great multitude. Israel had been divided into the house of Israel and the house of Judah. The house of Israel was taken captive by the Assyrians in 721 BC, and when the Assyrians were overcome in turn by Nebuchadnezzar, we know how he went up against Jerusalem and took the house of Judah captive, 604 BC. The killing of Jack's father signifies therefore the capture of King Zedekiah and the attempt to end the reign of the house of David by the killing of Zedekiah's two sons. This passage is not to be taken literally, for it has no reference to Jacob's natural father, Isaac. It refers to an attempt to destroy for all time the reigning house of David. When Nebuchadnezzar killed Zedekiah's sons, he thought he had accomplished this. But he had not reckoned with the Israel law which allowed the transfer of title through the female members of the royal family. He had not reckoned with the daughter of Zedekiah, who was whisked away from Jerusalem by Jeremiah and brought to Egypt. By this means God preserved the royal line of the house of David, transferring it by degrees to the northern shores of Ireland, to Scotland, and finally to England. The valuable possessions stolen by the giant signify the temple ornaments, the vessels and cups, anything and everything in Jerusalem made of precious metals taken by the Babylonians and set up in their own temples in Babylon. And all the vessels of the house of God, great and small, and the treasures of the house of the Lord, and the treasures of the king and of his princes, all these he brought to Babylon. 2 Chronicles chapter 36 verse 18. Jack's mother managed to escape, the story goes on to say. This may be taken as one of those living statements of truth, tucked away in the innocent composition of a children's story, a statement which Irish historical records bear out. One of the most dramatic episodes in Israel history is here hidden in the symbology of a Saxon folktale. And for what reason? Some ancient Saxon sage took this means of preserving intact an ancient Israel truth. In the sense that the house of David has been preserved and continues through the present reigning house in England, Jack has even now retrieved the enchanted harp which the giant stole from his father. The harp is, of course, the symbol of the house of David, 1 Samuel chapter 16, verse 19, and was taken away from the house of the giant by Jack when he realized that it was his rightful possession. However, the important detail should not be overlooked that the harp was not fully recovered by Jack until he had carried it down the ladder and had it safe in his home. This home is the same home that Hansel and Gretel tried to find after they left the witch's cottage. It refers to the kingdom of heaven, of which Jesus so often spoke. The enchanted harp, then, will not be completely restored until that day when our Lord shall return to the earth and take his place rightfully upon the throne of David. This event marks the ushering in of the kingdom of heaven upon earth. It is the time when the God of heaven shall set up a kingdom, which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left to other people, but it shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever, as we are told by Daniel, in Daniel chapter 2, verse 44. In the same way, a part of the material wealth that was stolen from Jack, Israel, back in the time of King Zedekiah, has been restored. Responding to the obligation put upon his people Israel by God, England, at the time of the reign of Elizabeth I, began to enter into world trade and to prosper materially. Her ships were found on every sea. Commerce brought her in contact with every land. Her mind then became inspired with inventions, new ways of manufacturing, and she grew and prospered industrially more than any other country of the world. But the giant is not dead yet. He is swiftly pursuing Jack across his threshold. It is not hard to see that the giant is hard upon Jack at the present time as we survey present-day England. Spiritually speaking, the nation is at a low ebb. It is an acknowledged fact that only a very small percentage of the people of England attend church. Economically, England has not yet recovered from the duress of World War II, and the English pound has sunk to its lowest value on the world market. Food scarcities continue in a country which has always boasted of its table. Starting with the attack upon Singapore in Asia in 1941, we have seen how the military power of England has been challenged, and how one by one she has given up mandates and powers she had enjoyed for many years. The greatest concession was made to India. Even now she is under pressure at the Suez Canal at the hands of Egypt, and also in other parts of the African continent. Surely the time of Jacob's trouble is known in England today. But the time of trouble will come to an end, and Jacob shall be saved out of it. Jeremiah chapter 30, verse 7. In the second chapter of Daniel, we read of the interpretation of a dream that puzzled Nebuchadnezzar. Daniel described 4 kingdoms which were to prevail in the world, starting with the rule of Babylon. He described this rule as a head of fine gold upon the great image which appeared to Nebuchadnezzar in the dream. Daniel made it plain that the Babylonian king was the first of these kingdoms, and that the whole giant image, in all of its stages, would rule the world until the stone that smote the image became a great mountain and filled the whole earth. Here again is a picture of the giant with whom Jack has to deal. The day is nearly upon us when, like David of old, Jack will take up a stone in his sling and with it strike the forehead of the giant, and the giant shall fall down dead. On that day will be fulfilled all the words of the angel spoken to Mary, the mother of Jesus. And behold, thou shalt conceive in thy womb, and bring forth a son, and shalt call his name Jesus. He shall be great, and shall be called the Son of the Highest. And the Lord God shall give unto him the throne of his father David. And he shall reign over the house of Jacob forever, and of his kingdom there shall be no end. Luke chapter 1, verses 31 through 33. The killing of the giant Goliath by David was therefore also a pattern of the future, and the stone in the sling is the same stone that will shatter the kingdoms of the earth. Jesus will come as he has promised and will be the capstone and supreme ruler of the kingdom of God. Thus, the story of Jack, the giant killer, is the story not only of Jacob and the house of Jacob, but it is the story also of Jesus and his return to the earth. He will smite this giant who has falsely taken over rulership of the earth, and when the giant has fallen, the rule of the kingdom of heaven upon earth will begin. Our story again parallels the scriptures when we read in Revelation chapter 19, verses 11 through 15, "In righteousness he doth judge and make war, and the armies which were in heaven followed him upon white horses, clothed in fine linen, white and clean. And out of his mouth goeth a sharp sword, that with it he should smite the nations. And he shall rule them with a rod of iron, and he treadeth the winepress of the fierceness and wrath of Almighty God." There is the third woman who figures in our story, she who lived in the house of the giant and befriended Jack. always warning him of the giant's approach and hiding him away. Who is this woman, and what does she stand for in the world today? In Revelation chapter 11, verse 3, we read of the two witnesses, who are explained in verse 4 as the two olive trees and the two candlesticks standing before the God of the earth. To relate these two symbols to the symbol of Jack, the giant killer, we shall arrive at an explanation of the woman in the giant's house. The two olive trees may be taken to be symbols of the house of Israel and the house of Judah, respectively. The Jack of our story incorporates both Israel and Judah as embodying the whole house of Jacob. The candlesticks are explained in Revelation chapter 1, verse 20, as the churches, of which there are 7 in all, each described in the 2nd and 3rd chapters of Revelation. The two candlesticks here stand for that purified portion of the church which is blended with Israel, and which shall join Israel in the rewards of the great day of the Lord. The enigma of the woman who lived in the house of the giant is explained partially by the fact that she lived in fear of the giant and yet was friendly to Jack. When the giant was killed by Jack, we conclude that the woman was free of her fear of the giant and lived in her house in peace and contentment. This woman can be likened to the candlesticks of Revelation, signifying the church, a portion of which has succumbed to the power of the giant, Babylon, mystery, and a part of which recognizes Jack, Israel, for what he is and is friendly to him. There are many in the church today who would like to acknowledge openly the identity of the Anglo-Saxon Israel peoples as Israel, yet are held back by their official positions. The church, in order to survive, has seemingly had to submit to the military and economic pressures of this great creature whose head of gold is Babylon. The church has been linked inseparably with the wars of the princes of the earth since the days of Leo I, 440 through 461 AD. When, as Bishop of Rome, he enjoined Emperor Valentinian III to establish a greater temporal power with the Church. Even the Reformation did not break this silent partnership. In England, it was Henry VIII who needed more money for his wars, and eyed the revenue that was drained out of England by the Pope of Rome for his own purposes. Luther would never have survived but for the friendship of the Duke of Saxony, who hid him from the ire of the Emperor Charles, and together with their electors of Germany backed the new movement with the sword. The modern church itself has acquired vast holdings and is burdened with possessions, and sayest, I am rich and increased with goods, Revelation chapter 3, verse 17. So Jesus described it. The possession of these goods exact an obligation from her, and so closely knit is the church with the economic makeup of our times that she quite naturally responds to its requirements. Modern business is based on contest, on conflict, and upon the survival of the fittest. It is modified warfare, and it is only a natural consequence that war itself should burst forth in violent forms at intervals. History is punctuated with these adjustments between groups and between nations. Jesus said that man cannot serve both God and mammon. When he comes in glory, it is a certainty that that part of the church which is engrossed in possessions and the things of this world will not escape judgment. The true church will be sustained and purified. That which is unworthy of his church shall be taken away. While Jack was in the giant's house, he was befriended by this woman, who was interested in his safety, she herself being under the direct domination of the giant. We get a picture of a woman serving unwillingly as a bond slave. This woman represents the church of today. She is partially in bondage to the beast that shall ascend out of the bottomless pit and go into perdition, Revelation chapter 17, verse 8, which, when it is killed, will free her from her bondage. In her desire to assist Jack, we read in her a secret desire to serve God only, to be cleansed and purified, and to be found worthy and acceptable to our Lord in the day when he shall return to earth, and the two witnesses shall ascend up to heaven in a cloud. Reading the 18th chapter of Revelation, we discover a parallel rendering of the death of the giant at the hands of Jack, when, at the bottom of the beanstalk, he chopped through the stem and the giant fell to the earth dead. Babylon the Great is fallen, is fallen. That the death of the giant beast will affect the world's economic structure will be seen in the fact that the merchants of the earth shall weep and mourn over her, for no man buyeth their merchandise any more. Then we will find that Jack shall have all of his money and his hen that lays eggs of gold, and he shall have his enchanted harp. He shall enjoy all of these things without further fear of the giant. He may join with John, the Revelator, in rejoicing that, after these things I heard a great voice of much people in heaven, saying, Alleluia, salvation and glory and honor and power unto the Lord our God. For true and righteous are his judgments. For he hath judged the great whore, giant, which did corrupt the earth with her fornication, and hath avenged the blood of his servants at her hand.